It is WKRK Radio in Murphy, North Carolina, 105.5 FM, 1320 AM, cable TV channel 25, worldwide at country.am. And Sheriff, is this one of those days where you're going to have to do all the talking again?
I may have to today.
Every time I sound like a frog, I threaten the sheriff with doing all the talking.
You're going to quit smoking.
Yeah. that is what I sound like.
There you go.
That is exactly what I sound like. Oh, good morning, Sheriff.
Good morning.
Did you have a good Thanksgiving?
We did. Had a great Thanksgiving. Family was together. Everybody was healthy, so I can't complain at all.
And you celebrated the day early.
I did. So we celebrated Thanksgiving on Wednesday. We got together a little early and decided to do that. And then we had just a small get together yesterday evening. So we wanted to spend some time together on Wednesday before everything got so busy, and it worked out well.
Very good.
Yeah.
Well, happy. It's 1 month today from Christmas.
It is.
It's hard to believe that.
I started to turn on my Christmas countdown before I came in here, and I forgot to turn it on.
We've gotten good with those countdowns.
We have.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll tell you right down to the second when Christmas starts.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we'll be having the 25 Days of Christmas coming up here on Singing News Radio. So if people like Christmas music, they're going to love WKRK this year.
Well, I understand you didn't make Walmart last night either. So.
I somehow missed that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people purposely missed that.
Yes, I did not experience any crowds last night, so I was pleased.
Yeah.
But
I'd made the comment to my wife. She was going to go down. The kids went down last night, and I said, I don't care if they was giving things away at Walmart for free. I don't want to go down and fight that mess. So,
was parking bad this year? Do you know anything?
It was, it was about normal. It was still up on the 4-lane and, around different places where people could find a place to park. But
I remember one year it was down.
It was almost Ingles one year. Yeah, and I'll be backed up the other way too. So, but I don't think it was quite that bad. But I think it was just a normal Thanksgiving night shopping at Walmart.
And today is Black Friday, and a lot of people out on the roads today. Right. We want to urge safety.
Yeah, I need to be sure and remind everybody to be careful if you're out there today listening on the radio, or you may be streaming on your phones or whatever. But if you're in Atlanta or you're Chattanooga, different places, be careful out today because there is a lot of traffic and people out and about. And really, those prices and things right there, there's good prices, good deals going on, but it's not worth getting hurt over.
Right.
It's not worth anything like that. And speaking of wrecks and things, one thing we do want to mention this morning, of course, the big national news this week, a bus crash over in Chattanooga. We want to just be in prayer for those families over there that lost their small children and others that are still in the hospital and injured. And so we just want to just remember them today on this Thanksgiving. I know they probably had a hard holiday, and it's been a rough time for them. So one day away from getting out of school and those kind of things. So
could not imagine what those parents are. And being in the media, I was watching David Carroll on Channel 3. He was reporting live from the scene, and you could see on his eyes.
Right.
A lot of times news people get desensitized to a lot of things, but you could tell that he was heartbroken, and it was good to be able to see him cover that with such respect and compassion.
As do emergency workers. A lot of times they put on the stone face and the kind of desensitizing themselves to things. But when you have an incident like that happen, of that magnitude, of that type of tragedy, it can't help but affect people. If you have any heart and soul at all, it's going to affect you.
Mm-hmm.
So we just want to give our prayers and stuff out to those families out there. And also, speaking of Thanksgiving this week, I brought something with me today that I wanted to talk about just real quick. As you know, I'm big on trying to look over our history of the United States and kind of where we came from. And there's an old saying that says you don't know where you're going unless you know where you've been. And unless we look back and see where we've been, we don't know where we're going. One of the big things that's always in recent times has been a huge issue has been separation of church and state, and has been, the argument over God in schools and God in your country and those type of things. And I think that's one thing about this national election. I think why people are so passionate about that was because of the Supreme Court justices that are coming up to be appointed and potentially having appointments within the next few years. So, people are very concerned about that. And I went back and I thought, I want to go back and look at our national holiday of Thanksgiving and kind of how that came about. We all know the story of the Pilgrims and the, and helping the Indians helping the Pilgrims and the first Thanksgiving and all those kind of things. But I thought as far as the holidays concerned, as far as our government, what was that all about? What did that entail? And so I went back and started looking, and it was actually Thanksgiving was decreed on October 3rd of 1789 by George Washington. And, a lot of times we don't think about it going back that far as a national holiday, but it really did. It go back to 1789. And I want to read this to you and then talk about this for just a couple minutes. We don't have to dwell on it the whole time, but just for a few minutes here. On October 3rd, 1789, George Washington made the following proclamation and created the first Thanksgiving Day designated by the national government of the United States of America. And this is what he had to say. He said, "Whereas it is the duty of all nations to acknowledge the providence of Almighty God, to obey His will, to be grateful for His benefits, and humbly implore His protection and His favor, whereas both houses of Congress have by their joint committee requested me to recommend to the people of the United States a day of public thanksgiving and prayer, to be observed by acknowledging with grateful hearts the many signal favors of Almighty God, especially by affording them an opportunity peacefully to establish a form of government for their safety and happiness." And he goes on to say, "Now therefore I do recommend and assign Thursday, the 26th day of November, next, to be devoted by the people of the United States to the service of that great and glorious being, who is the beneficent author of all good that was, that is, or that will be. And also that we may then unite in most humbly offering our prayers and supplications to the great Lord and ruler of the nations, and beseech Him to pardon our national and other transgression, to enable us all, whether in public or private sessions, to perform several and relative duties properly and punctually, to render our national government a blessing to all people, by constantly being a government of wise, just, and constitutional laws, discreetly and faithfully executing and obeying to protect and guide all sovereigns and nations, and to bless them with good government, peace, and concord, to promote the knowledge and practice of religion, of true religion and virtue, and to increase of science among them and us, and generally to grant unto all mankind such a degree of temporal prosperity as He alone knows to be the best." When I think about this and think about what George Washington had to say, it certainly did not sound like a separation of church and state to me. Right. It sounded like that, that the Congress and the president himself back in 1789 was giving God all the glory for everything. And if you look, there's about 9 or 10 things here he said in here that directly went toward God and toward what we were supposed to do with Thanksgiving and what Thanksgiving was all about. When we think about Thanksgiving and we eat our turkey this week and we celebrated Thanksgiving, most people eat the same thing. Most people had turkey and dressing and ham and, and those type of casseroles and potatoes and cranberry sauce. You can't forget that, And so as we're putting together this memory of our celebration of the United States and our celebration of Thanksgiving, we have to go back and say, what is the holiday about? Mm-hmm. Well, the holiday was about thanking God for His favor upon us. It wasn't about thanking the Indians. It wasn't about thanking the Pilgrims for coming here. It wasn't about thanking, the cooperation of making it through the first winter. That was not what Thanksgiving's all about. Thanksgiving is about, he named off several things here. One thing he named off was the acknowledging the providence of God. Mm-hmm. Of acknowledging the fact of that we would not even be a nation without God, and without God's providence and guidance, that we wouldn't even be here. And that's one of the things we're supposed to do at Thanksgiving. It's supposed to thank God for our nation, thank God for being here. The other thing that George Washington mentioned in this was to obey God's will, and that not only to acknowledge the providence of God, but was to obey God's will and what He had for us, and to seek His guidance. He said for us to humbly ask for His protection. And for Thanksgiving, we're not only supposed to acknowledge the providence of God and obey His will, but we're supposed to ask for God's protection and thanksgiving for our nation. Right. And we're supposed to pray, for God to continue to protect us. And we're also to acknowledge, according to what George Washington had to say here, we're also to acknowledge God's favor, His blessings, His good things that He's given us, all the great things that we have. And we're to devote ourselves to God's service. And so when you think about these things and you think about the things that George Washington had mentioned in this first proclamation, he tells us that we're to devote ourselves to God, that we're to acknowledge what God's done for us, that we're to offer prayers and we're to offer supplications to God. We're supposed to pray not only for our personal forgiveness, but also forgiveness of our nation. We're supposed to pray for all the things that our nation has done wrong and ask for forgiveness of that as a corporate prayer. And as a day that our whole nation comes together and asks God's His prevenience and His grace and His blessing upon us, that He would forgive us our sins as a nation, that He would forgive our sins as people individually, and to enable us to bless each other. And he finishes it up by saying, to promote knowledge and practice of true religion and virtue that only God knows best. And so when you think about the first proclamation of Thanksgiving and what we're supposed to be doing at Thanksgiving is basically giving God thanks, is thanking God for all the wonderful things He's done for us. And when you look at all these things that happen in our nation, especially our young folks and people our age and younger, we have been brainwashed into this thing of we can't mention God in government and we can't mention God in our lives. And if we mention God or try to talk about God in our workplace or try to talk about God in our schools or try to talk about God in our government, that we're violating some unwritten law. But according to our founding fathers, everything they did was based upon God and was thanking God and acknowledging God and acknowledging that we wouldn't be here as a nation without God. And I think we need to look back upon our history and look back at where we came from and understand that whether we're in law enforcement, whether we are enforcing the laws of the nation, whether we are in civil government, whether we are school teachers, no matter what form of government that we're in, that we're to acknowledge that we are where we are only because we're blessed by God, and He's the one and He's the only one that is wise, that can give us direction in the place we need to go. When we forget that, then we fall apart as a nation. And when we forget that and forget that we're a nation of laws and forget that we're a nation that depends upon God, then we become like one of these other places like Rome and Mesopotamia and these other places that will eventually collapse. There is a freedom that we need to have, but there are also rules and regulations and guidelines that we must follow. We can become too free. And when we become too free, then that's when we fail as a nation.
I noticed he had mentioned, was it Thursday, November 26th?
Right.
You being the history buff, I'll ask you, is that
right.
when the fourth Thursday came about?
That's where the fourth Thursday came about, and then thereafter, there were some more proclamations after this, and thereafter it became a standard fourth Thursday of every November.
It's one of the few holidays that floats.
It is.
And I was just learning about Election Day this past year. I was reading somewhere the reason it's on Tuesday, the 1st November. That's originally because of the farmers getting their harvest in before they can go and having a convenient time for everybody to get together. And that was based on farming, from what I understand.
Yeah.
I did not know that until I read those notes this year.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in our nation like that we don't know about or hadn't ever been told, and and that's one of the things I think it's so important. I think if I have a fault with our public school system, I think one of the faults that I have with the school system right now is we've gotten away from teaching history. We've gotten away from teaching of our government, of the founding fathers, and what their thought processes were, and kind of how we got to where we are. Most young people, like I say, I consider myself young, our age and younger. Most people, when you talk to them and you ask them these questions about our government and the way we were founded, and they immediately go into that separation of church and state, and there's no place for God in government and all that, because that's what they've been taught. But nobody has went back and really done history with our young people, and so our young people don't know where we came from. And so I think it's important that we get that message out there, that we let people know that we're not here just by some random chance, but our forefathers fled European nations and came here to form a government, one nation under God. And we need to remember that.
Right. All right. Moving on to wildfires around the area. We had one that was just it was an overnight fire that was just down the street from the detention center, your office.
Yeah.
And that was Sunday morning about 1:18.
It was.
Approximately 1:18.
Yeah.
In a few seconds. That was called in, and that was possibly caused by someone just throwing a cigarette butt out the window.
That is the belief at this point, is that someone driving down the road tossed a cigarette butt out the window and ignited a fire. And that just kind of shows you the dry conditions that we have had.
And even though we had a little bit of rain the other night, has not even put a dent into the dryness of our area right now.
I went hunting the next morning. Guess that would be yesterday morning, Thanksgiving morning, and it had rained the night before. Had come a good rain, and when I went hunting yesterday morning, it was actually the rain was just moving out, and water was still dripping off trees. It was still dropping on you. But when I went to the woods and found me a place to hunt, I kicked some leaves out of the way, and when I got about an inch under the leaves, it was just dry under it, So even though we did get some rain, we didn't get near enough to even squash the fires, much less get us out of a drought condition.
Our area, I think the last map I looked at, we're a little over 20 inches under where we should be for this time of year.
Right.
So we're at a deficit quite a bit right now.
Yeah, we certainly are. And like I say, the fires that's going on around us, the firefighters, like we said last week, are doing wonderful jobs. They're doing great jobs on saving structures, of getting things under control. A couple reports I just printed off this morning before I came in to make sure that we were accurate on our numbers here. The three fires in our area that we're mostly concerned about is the Bottler fire, or Boteller fire, they pronounce it different ways, over in Clay County. The Tellico fire over in Swain and Macon counties. That was a Tellico Furby fire that burnt together. And then the Maple Springs Ruffy fire over in Graham County. Those are the three fires that most people are concerned about right now. And the one over in Clay County right now had started on October 25th. It consumed over 9,000 acres.
That's a month ago.
Yeah, and it was 9,036 acres right now is where it's at today. And it's 77% contained today. So they've pretty much got it under control. If we can get a good rain at the first of the week, they should be able to get that one near 100%, contained. But the Tellico fire over in Swain County and Macon counties that burns in the Warrior area, through the Nantahala Gorge up through the Warrior area on into Macon County, it has grown to 13,800 acres, little over 13,800 acres. It started on November 3rd, so it's almost a month old too.
I understand there was some damage done to the fire tower on Wyebald.
There was, according to reports I had gotten. Also, I hadn't talked to those officially over there, but I'd also saw the reports of damage there at the fire tower. But the good news on that fire is that it's 91% contained right now. So if we can get a couple, 2-3 days of rain, that one should be near out. And then the Old Ruffy fire over in Graham County, the Maple Springs Old Ruffy fire, it's right now about 7,788 acres. It started on November 4th, and it is about 71% contained. So they've got a good handle on it over there too. The problem with the Maple Springs and Ruffy fire is that it's in such a remote area it's hard to get to. And so they pretty much got like a 3-side containment on that with 77%. And so they're basically letting it burn 2 places where they can get to it, where they can get access to the backside of it. They're still fighting it with aircraft and those kind of things right now because it is so hard to get to. And there's other fires around, but those are the 3 fires that most people are concerned about and wants updates on. And so hopefully, like I say, they're getting close to getting those contained. So hopefully within the next week or so, especially if we get some rain to assist the firefighters, hopefully those will either be under control or they will be near under control at that point.
And then in Brasstown Wednesday, there was a scare too. Evacuations happened
at Green Cove over in Brasstown.
So there was the whole community that had to evacuate quickly, and thank goodness, emergency crews got there quickly and were able to get that one out.
The other fire over in Clay County, they were able to pull crews off of it and get over there real quick since they were close to it. They were able to get manpower and access to that pretty quick, along with aircraft that was dropping water on the Clay County fire over on the Bottler fire or Boteller fire, and they was able to get it over and start dropping water on this one to get it out pretty quick. So, like I say, our hats off to the fire crews and the firefighters. When those calls come out, they have been right on top of it and got it under control.
I've never been in a situation myself where officials say you must evacuate your residence for your safety. I've never been. I can only imagine what kind of fear those people are going through, wondering if they're going to lose.
I actually have a deputy that lives over there in the Shooting Creek area. He lives in Clay County. He works here in Cherokee County, and also have some friends that live over in there. And they literally, the deputy was telling me, and some other people over there, literally have their valuables packed up in boxes in their house.
Oh, wow.
So in the event that they have to evacuate or leave, they can grab things quickly and get out of there. And so I don't know how much longer that will have to be, but I do know that at least there for a period of time that people in those areas were keeping things boxed up and ready to go and ready to throw in a car and leave if they needed to. So,
all right.
One thing, let me do say this before we move on. As of today, the resources that are expended on these fires here in western North Carolina is 8 fire crews, 65 fire engines, 7 helicopters, 2 tankers, 11 dozers, 7 water tenders, 640 total personnel fighting the fires, and up to this date, the total acreage burned is 33,252 acres. That's burnt today. And so when you think about 33,000 acres consumed, it is amazing that
that's just western North Carolina.
That's just western North Carolina. Yeah, that's just in Cherokee Clay.
There's a huge one in Fannin County that is really large.
I checked that one last night, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think that one in Fannin County was up near, I want to say 15,000, 16,000 acres now.
It was
or
huge,
like
I remember.
That. It was a big fire. It was bigger than the ones we had here, and it's still burning. I think it was like 70% contained or something like that. And but it's still, like I say, fires all over the area are still raging.
At this point, have any arrests been made locally for arson or any motives? Or?
You probably saw on a Facebook post, I think it might have been on your post on WKRK, that they had a person they're wanting to question about the Walmart fire, trying to identify this person and wanting to question them about that fire. Some of the fires that's been around, the Tellico fire, the Furby fire, a couple of these in Graham County and Clay County, they do have suspects. They do have people that they are looking at. Some information as far as people that were seen in the area, vehicles that were seen in the area right before the fire started. They're continuing to investigate that. But to my knowledge, as today, they've not arrested anybody from that. But they do have suspects for those fires.
All right. Are most of them suspected to be arson from a malicious or just a careless act? And from my understanding, the one in on Green Cove was someone emptying their ashes out, which I'm sure they've done for years and years. But the situations are different now with the dry conditions.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. I think there are some incidents that happen such as that no one intended to start a fire. But there are others that are clear-cut arson that they know they were intentionally set for the purpose of creating a forest fire. One place, I'm trying to be careful about what I say because some of these are federal investigations and don't want to give out too much information. But I do know that one of the fires that were set were there were some instruction signs as to do not burn, these type of things, and fire dangers, hazardous conditions. And we do know there was an intentional fire set under one of those signs, so we know that was a created fire. We do know there are some time release fires that were set, that people are creative about igniting things after they're gone and after they left. So we do know there are some things that were intentional out there, and whys can't be answered till you can find the people and talk to them.
What kind of penalties would that person be facing when they get arrested?
Well, it's a couple things. As one, it depends on where it's at. If it's private property, they're subject to state sanctions. But things that happen on U.S. Forest Service property are federal violations, so you can be charged in federal court or for those, and there are different penalties involved with that. But one thing I do want to say about that is, if I was in that situation, one of the things that to me that would be more devastating than the actual penalty as far as jail time or those type of things would be the fact of that upon conviction, these people are responsible in a civil realm of time that's spent, money that's spent on these things, anything that was destroyed or hurt. If someone was to die in a fire and you intentionally set it, you could be charged with murder, so if you had a firefighter out there that fell in the fire or got burned up fighting a fire, the person that said it could actually be charged with murder for causing the it's called the furtherance of action. It's like if you go into a convenience store and you rob it at gunpoint and you leave, but the cashier was to die of a heart attack because of your actions, you could still be charged with murder because you set things in motion that caused it to happen. So it's kind of along those same lines. If you intentionally set things in motion that results in someone's death, you can be liable for that.
And there are rewards being offered. I know our governor is offering, I think, up to $10,000 reward for information leading to the arrest.
Yeah.
And all the information, if you can scroll back through our Facebook page, there's tons of information on how to report those.
Right.
If you have any information to lead law enforcement to any arsonists out there.
Well, this is one thing that we do want to find out. Whys. We want to find out why people are stating them, what's going on out there. It could be anything from the fact of, like we talked about last week, it could be anything from the fact of what they call a pyromaniac that just gets pleasure from it.
Right.
Or it could be something that someone's trying to cover up a crime, or it could be something, of just being, as the old timers say, just downright mean, just wanting to cause trouble. So it could be a combination of all kind of different things, and those whys can't be answered till you can find a person and talk to that person.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just one of those things that I feel confident there will be arrests made. I feel confident that they'll eventually get to that place. But as good law enforcement work, you want to make sure you do things right before you start charging people with crimes.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, I see our time is getting close to being going. What else would you like to talk about today on this Friday?
Just a couple of things. People like to hear updates on our calls for service and what we're doing as a sheriff's office. And I just want to mention that real quick. I run some numbers this week, just kind of see where we're at. I've been keeping track of our call volumes from 2013 until up to now. That was 1 year before I took office, all the way up to, actually it would be considered 2 years because I took office December of 2014. So actually it's 2 years before I took office, all the way up to now. But in 13, we were averaging in the neighborhood of 1,200 to 1,400 calls a month was about what we were doing as a sheriff's office. In last year, in 2015, our low month, let me look here real quick, just make sure I'm not telling a fib. Our low month for 2015 was in January, and it was 1,500 calls for the month. And our high month looks like it was 3,393 calls.
That was a busy month.
Yeah, that was in October of last year. But we also in September had 3,100 calls in September. Had 2,958, which is a few calls short of 3,000 in August. 2,700 calls in July, 2,400 calls in June. So you can see it was busy, 2,400 to 3,400 all summer long, all the way up into the winter time. And even through the winter, November, December of last year, we had 2,600 and 2,400 calls for those months. Starting in 2016, it didn't slow down. In January of 2016, we're still at 2,600 calls. In January, that's supposed to be a low month. That's supposed to be when we're dead.
Right.
But we're still running 2,600 calls in January. But I'm happy to say that since January, things seem to have leveled off a bit. We are holding steady at between 2,200 and looks like all the way through August, about 2,300 calls a month is what we were averaging.
Not quite double, but almost double,
yeah, from 2013. January, I'll just go through them real quick. January was 2,664, February 2,418, March 2,212, April we did 2,213 calls, May we did 2,173 calls, June 2,244 calls, and July 2,316 calls. And August was 2,360 calls. But September, it picked back up again a little bit more. September of this year, we did 3,029 calls. October, we did 2,955 calls. In November, Our numbers are not in yet for November. So we're holding there along at the end of summer. We did go back up around 3,000 calls per month, and we're holding steady there between 2,500 and 3,000. I think is what we're going to look at.
Does this include calls to the Sheriff's Department and 911 dispatch?
This is just Sheriff's Office calls.
Just Sheriff's
Office calls through dispatch. Last year, I think dispatch did something in the neighborhood of about 90,000 calls, that including fire, EMS, law enforcement. They did somewhere around 90,000 calls last year. So that's a lot of calls for two dispatchers sitting in there on most nights, and sometimes three. One of the things, and I don't care to make it public, it's something that I'm going to try to attempt to do this year, is when we go through our budgets and we look at things, I think one of the things that we really need to address is we need to address our dispatch pay, and we need to address those things because our dispatchers are probably the most overworked and most underpaid employees in Cherokee County government. When you think about this and you think about it's a funny thing. I know we're probably running along, but I want to mention this real quick before we go. I may have mentioned this last week, I'm not sure, but we gotten a complaint of the way a dispatcher was rude to someone on the phone. Mm-hmm. I went back and pulled the CD and listened to it, and what that person that called in did not know that we had a wreck going on and also an alarm call. I think we might have mentioned this last week. An alarm call going at the same time. And this one dispatcher had they wear headsets like we're wearing. The dispatcher, through 2 ears and a headset, had the person calling in about the fire or about the wreck, had rescue personnel responding to the wreck. She's having to document times and write down times to that. In the middle of that, had a call from an alarm company of a burglar alarm going off in the home, trying to get information from there, sending law enforcement to that call. So law enforcement was also talking to her, had trying to get information from the control center, from the alarm call. They were giving their caller IDs, information, and she's having to type all this stuff and log all this stuff in the radio as rescue still calling in, as fire still calling in, as the people on the EMS on the wreck scene. And it's just chaos in this recording that I'm listening to, and I'm trying to pick out everything that's happening in it. And when I call the dispatch supervisor and talk to them about it, they just kind of chuckle and they say, that's just a normal wreck. That's just a normal day. There's nothing special about that, know. And when you think about what these dispatchers have to do to keep everything straight, to keep everything documented, to keep times down the way they need to keep them down, to make sure everyone's calls get answered, and then the public calling in on top of that, cell phone callers calling in reporting the wreck.
Right. And
so when you have all these things happening at the same time, not just anybody can sit down at one of those consoles and dispatch.
That's a lot to juggle at one time. And
not to mention the certifications they have to go through, the technology they have to deal with. And, when they sit down at the dispatch desk, it's like a NASA center in front of them. I mean, they're just screens everywhere and maps. And
there's not always time for Southern hospitality when you're on emergency calls.
Right. And basically on that, so the public understands that when you call in and the dispatcher picks up the phone and says, is this an emergency? And you say no, and they say, please hold. There's a reason for that. It's not because they don't want to talk to you. It's not because they don't want to hear your problem. It's because they've got a million other things going on in the background. So one of our goals this year is going to be trying to address this and trying to address the pay that they get, trying to get them some pay that's comparable to the rest of the state, get them some pay that when people come to work for dispatch and they're having to go through all this high stress anxiety, that they will also be compensated in some way for that, to encourage them to stay, to encourage them to continue to do it. We talked about the school bus wreck over in Chattanooga and the emotions that law enforcement goes through, the emotions that the news media goes through, and these people that's on scene. What a lot of people also don't take in consideration is the emotional stress that dispatch goes through that's receiving the calls. Sometimes they're given emergency directions on the phone. They're trying to save someone's life. Sometimes people die on the other end of the phone. Sometimes suicides are committed on the other end of the phone. Sometimes a lot of these things are happening when dispatch is trying to do the very best they can do, and that lives an emotional stress upon these people too. And so they're kind of the people in the background that nobody thinks about, but they are the center hub, and they are what makes everything else work.
It reminds me back when I was in school trying to decide what I wanted to be when I grew up.
Right.
I was thinking I wanted to be a psychiatrist. And then I actually thought about what they do all day. They sit there and listen to people's problems all day long. And I happen to think, what kind of emotional toll would that have on me?
Right.
Hearing people having problems all day long at the end of the day, would I be in a good mood or a bad mood?
Right.
So I quickly decided radio's a better career
There you
for
go.
me. We get to talk to nice people all
Maybe
day long.
get people in a good mood at the end of the day.
That's right. So, but I could imagine, because dispatch, normally the people that call in there,
Right.
they're having problems all day. So
Right.
they can't be happy and chipper all the
Right.
time. I know they try their best.
Yeah.
But
Well, we have a good group of people and down there, and they do a great job, and I just want to acknowledge that and do something to try to help them. We get people who, for example, we had one dispatch the other day that was had been worked for years that turned in a resignation. They were fixing to go work in a private sector somewhere else, and the question was asked to them, why do you want to go do that? And the response was, well, I can go up here and work for this store, and I can make as much, if not more, money than I'm making here, and I don't have the stress. I don't have to worry about all these things, that's going on. I can go do my job and go home and not think about it. And so pay is not everything, but I use this illustration a lot. If you can take a 21-year-old recruit straight out of school, and I can say, I can give you a gun, I can give you a job and a car, and you can drive real fast, and you can almost wreck and kill yourself, or you can kill other people, or you can get shot, or you can shoot other people. And then you're going to have paperwork on top of that and probably get sued if something like that happens, and and go through all these things of what could happen. And then he can have an option of going to work at Walmart and make the same amount of money. Mm-hmm. Most people are going to go to work at Walmart because they don't want all that in their life for the same amount of pay.
Right.
Pay's not everything, but pay counts when the bank calls.
It helps retain good employees.
It does. Yeah.
All
Well, thank you. I know we're running long today.
Well, Sheriff, thank you very much. You have plans next week. I'm curious to find out who draws the short straw next week.
I'm sure probably Roger or Mark One will be here.
All right.
Unless I can talk somebody from detention coming. I don't know if I can get Patterson or somebody coming from
All
detention, but I'll get somebody here next week.
Sounds good.
All right. You have a
Sheriff,
great
thank
weekend.
you. You do the same. It's WKRK in Murphy, North Carolina, 105.5 FM, 1320 AM, cable TV channel 25, worldwide at country.am. Stay tuned. Your weather forecast next, brought to you by Carpet Mart.